Oh, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. This took a very, very long time to start. I am very dubious whether we've actually started or not. It says live up in the corner, so maybe we have. Um, Good day to everybody. Good day, dear viewer. We've got Joshua the Contentious, young Jamie Bignell, and of course, Bruce is in the house. So, first off, to kick off, um, Bruce, Silver Surfer. I'm getting there. Look, I'm getting there as well. Sora, Silver Sora. I'm also 50, and apparently it says 50-year-olds that own all the drones in the world.
Yeah, of course we do. And you've got a long way to go, Gary, trust me. Yeah, I'm quite surprised by the number of people who are approaching my age that are flying drones, and not just Mavics and Phantoms, but sometimes racing drones too. It's quite amazing. I had a couple of women here yesterday from Canada, and they'd fit the Silver Sora category, and they just tried to escape from the onerous drone rules of Canada, come to New Zealand to fly their Mavics and their Sparks, only to find that they rolled up here at our airport and they couldn't fly them here either. But yeah, it certainly is something that's appealing to the not so young. It's like, I remember when skateboarding came out 40 years ago now, that it was all about young kids, all about young kids. But we've got a similar craze now, and it's not just all about the young. I've noticed certainly in drone racing, there's a lot of former skateboarders, former motocross riders getting into drone racing because the same adrenaline thrill, but not so hard on your body. And I think that's why perhaps the older generation are picking up on it.
Well, that's right. You mentioned, yeah, this keyboard equation quite work with. I see where you're going, but yes, yeah, not so hard on your body, and yeah, I've also heard the term, which I didn't know because I don't keep up with the young people, but boy toys apparently, and it didn't work with your Canadian ladies that came to see you, but apparently the drone is the boy toy or a boy toy at the moment. So the young folks say. So anyway,
Gary, I'll caution you. I don't think that means quite what you think it means in every context. That could have several meanings.
Well, that's
You're thinking toy boy.
I can't comment on the world of Kitty Hawk IO. It's a strange place, and I don't want to go there. But really, that's the bottom line. But that makes we can jump straight to you now. Got a lot of noise in the background there, Josh. Is that the people trying to bang the door down with "Save Our LAANC," "We Love LAANC," "LAANC for the Win," "LAANC Rules" posters and all that sort of thing? Have you had much feedback? And maybe you could, for those that didn't read your article on LANCe, I've heard some people call it LANCe, that was published yesterday. Perhaps you'd like to just give a helicopter overview of your current thoughts and worries.
Yeah, so just really quick, I think that if you're not familiar, LANCe is the Low Altitude Airspace and Notification System. The FAA is designing to kind of stem the rising tide of airspace authorizations that have been working in unison to basically bog down the FAA. It's been a huge problem for them to keep up with everything that's happening. LANCe is an automated system that allows them to offer airspace waivers way faster than they could before. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. And so what happened is the FAA put out a request for help to the private industry, and out of 41 applications, they picked 12 companies. Those 12 companies were part of the LANCe working group. This basically was a collaboration between the FAA and private industry to build this notification and airspace system. Now, this is where things start to get contentious for me. So those companies are larger companies, and they are now getting exclusive access to the LANCe rollout. So they're doing this beta test. It's a beta test. It's a closed beta of the LANCe system. Those 12 companies are going to have access before everybody else. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, that sounds a lot like picking winners. If you get to design the system, that's kind of your incentive to be a part of the working group. If you are there saying, well, I want exclusive access as well, that seems to be sort of a problem, and that's kind of the FAA making decisions for the market. The free market should really be the person making the decision there. And so the reason that I'm making this is because this point is because let's say they're opening it up in Reno, Nevada, which is one of the 4 test sites that is available today. The number of flights inside of Reno, Nevada is not going to substantially change. And the number of providers that are able to offer flights, LANCe authorizations, will change. And so if you can't scale the number of providers, you're never going to be able to scale the number of flights. This is a fundamental problem. And so we were asking the FAA, can we please be a part of the beta? We don't need to help design the system, but we'd like to be a part of it. We were kind of put off at every corner. And so that was disappointing. And what we were worried about is the ability for competitors to be able to say, hey, we've authorized access to LANCe. We have access to this before anybody else. We were the first ones to do this. And so last week, our worst fears kind of came true. Skyward was authorized as the first FAA-approved LANCe provider. And when you look at their marketing, all of the things saying, this is a test, this is a private beta, this is something that could be put, the genie could be put back in the bottle at any moment, according to the FAA, none of this was mentioned. And, you know, Gary, I work with the press a lot, and by and large, they're good people who want to tell an accurate story. However, what we found is that these same mistakes were being repeated over and over again in all of these articles. There was no mention of beta testing. There was no mention of regular testing. This was obviously a problem. So I decided to write an op-ed piece, which you graciously featured on your website. And I don't know if you have the phrase down there, but I think that it would be described as kicking a hornet's nest.
Yeah, several hornets, and then Patrick wrote one for us on another subject today. So I've had a very, very amusing inbox in the last couple of days. Very amusing indeed. So much so that I had, for the first time ever, I had a whole page of comments before I came to anything interesting. Yeah, no, there's a lot of worry, a lot of confusion in the land out there. And the thing that really grates with me about LANCe, I did remember to turn the mic on, didn't I? Is that see, where's the E? You call it LANCe. Where's the E in it? I don't get that at all. LAANC, LANC. That's a surfing term.
It's a soft double A. It's a soft double A.
Oh, yeah, okay. It's a surfing term here, but it does nothing for safety. It's not going to stop the bad actors, and nowhere else in the world has gridded up towns into little square grids with altitudes, and it's just, where did this idea come from? It doesn't make any sense at all, and it doesn't improve safety. That's my two concerns about it, really. Bruce, have you had time to study and look at it?
Yeah, I'd look at it. It doesn't look too, I mean, it's in theory, it's a good idea because you know exactly how high you can go based on where you are. It doesn't stop people doing bad things, but it does give good people the information they need to remain compliant. And that's probably it, because the only people whose behavior you're going to change are the good actors. So give them all the information you can so they're operating fully informed. Bad actors, well, enforcement's the only way you're going to change their behavior. So it's addressing a sector of the drone community. And so it's doing a good job, although I don't know that the way they've gone about doing it is the best way, but it is, you know, definitely a step forward, I think.
And the fact that Verizon is almost like the gatekeeper now in a roundabout way, because of course you won't need to pay for that LANCe clearance, but it will form part of your extended special package service that you have with the service providers. So yeah, you're not paying for that.
Exactly. I always get my hackles up when I see people charging for safety. You can't charge people for safety. Here in New Zealand, the Civil Aviation and the Met Service, they were charging for essential safety information. No, you don't do that. Either it's essential safety information and therefore you make it available to save lives, or it's something else. So you can't muddy the waters by saying this is really important, but you have to pay for it. No, that doesn't work.
Yeah, no, and I just need to tell you in the comments, Andrew Murphy says that he likes you, Bruce. But anyway, there's no accounting for taste. There is absolutely no accounting for taste. Anyway, Josh, let's send it back to you now.
Yeah, so the FAA is in a very unenviable position, right? Here's an agency that was built to handle the, let's call it 50,000 full-scale airplanes in the United States, and they're dealing with tens of thousands of airspace authorization waiver requests and millions of drones suddenly in the national airspace. And I get that, right? It's very easy to say, well, it's their fault. No, they're doing an amazing job in an unenviable position. But the problem that I have is if you're going to have a closed beta, if you're going to have a private beta, make it private. Make it so that, yeah, you know what? You can be a part of this and you can help design this and you can have all the advantages of knowing how this works intimately, inside and out. But guess what? You can't market it. You can't go out there and shout from the mountaintops, we're able to offer this and we're going to charge people for it, when in fact the FAA could shut the whole thing down next week. And that's kind of the part where I find truth in advertising to be very important. At Kitty Hawk, we are staunch advocates in the idea that integrity is going to matter in this industry and honestly in every industry. So when I see things that are inaccurate over and over and over again, I start to think that perhaps the chances of it being the press making a mistake is less, and perhaps it's maybe the marketing department steering the narrative in a direction. So it was with great reserve yesterday that I decided to write this op-ed piece. And quite honestly, it was just to control the narrative and correct the facts. We don't really have a political outlook on this. We don't take sides on terms of policy. We really just want what's best for the national airspace and to empower the most commercial operations possible. So in this way, our stake is not in UTM or big bets or moonshots. We just want to make sure that the playing field's level and that people have the opportunity to use a provider that they want to use. And in this case, it's been disappointing to see the way people are marketing and representing themselves. And then on top of that, the way that they're leveraging the government's strained resources for their own benefit.
Well, yeah, that's a big answer. And another thing that comes to my mind is, so if RPA operators are having to use a service, not quite pay for that bit of it, but still use a paid-for service to get access to the airspace, surely manned aviation is going to have to be putting chipping in a little bit as well, or getting out of the way. And, if I've got to pay through some service or other to be there, I don't want Captain Cessna 172 coming through. I want that block of airspace for my time when I'm there. So you can't have one rule for one and one rule to the other for the others. It doesn't seem right to me, but that's a very contentious way of thinking. Who shall I throw that at here? Anyone want to pick that up?
I just want to say, as a hobbyist, as a sort of everyday person who flies radio control models, supposedly unmanned aerial systems or drones nowadays. I think a lot of this sort of the regulation airspace sort of thing is complicated. It is very complicated, and there are a lot of sort of two-letter ways of describing these sorts of things. And I really think that Bruce has summarized it all really well in his recent videos, and that's just keeping it simple. But definitely, Gary, having links on your website to useful places where you can look at the airspace, and for commercial operators and people who are operating UAVs, making money, etc. I think any tool is useful, basically. But as an amateur hobbyist, a lot of it goes over my head, alas. But no, it's all very interesting stuff.
Well, Jamie, the reason I wanted to get you on a couple of weeks ago, and you had a camera failure and all that sort of thing, is because I was getting very upset about. No, don't worry about that. But that you are the representation of youth here, and if UTMs and things really come forward, you're at university now and you're studying. When I first met you, you were in the village you grew up in and I grew up in England, and you were playing with bottle rocket. I say playing, that's very rude, but you had bottle rockets there, and my brother and I thought, this kid with his bottle rockets, this is going to be very, very dull, but we'll humor him anyway. And when you fired that rocket, we were gobsmacked. We were absolutely gobsmacked, and it was again. But why I wanted you along is, with UTMs and the way things are going, big businesses, and we're moving the topic a little bit, are very keen on having model aircraft flying only happening at model aircraft fields and putting age restrictions on it. One of them I hear is 16, which will be shocking. Let's just so you're at university now, Jamie. What are you studying now?
Yeah, so sorry, I didn't say thanks for having me on, Gary. But I'm studying electronic engineering with space sciences here at Bath. And as you alluded to the water rockets, it's basically, since I've been very young, we've been playing a lot with the bottle rockets. Obviously, they do sound like a toy, and obviously they were to start off with. Basically, just a very cheap and economical way of getting into rocketry. The materials themselves are everyday; they're simple lemonade bottles. But from there, along with my academic stuff at school, it all started to snowball. And then from there, we started developing. I started learning more about electronics, about simple 555 timers, microcontrollers, and obviously this huge boom with Arduino and the massive, the lowering in cost of sort of memory for microcontrollers has basically made really powerful sensors and things incredibly accessible to people. So the water rockets have snowballed into something which is actually technically now, I suppose, a UAS. It flies over 400 feet, has a good 30-second, well, 45-second hang time. It has an onboard flight controller now, which has, built-in MEMS sensors to detect apogee when the rocket tips over. Of course, the parachute can be deployed. It's got a logging altimeter. I have obviously future projects at university looking at the spin of the rocket and using trim tabs on the fins. But of course, as I say, as a hobbyist flying rockets in Dowlish Wake, a lot of the regulations and so forth, I've just operated with common sense, really, and there is nothing where we are. And but no, it's all very interesting how the technologies now with UAVs. It's just a big boom. I think the technology has become massively accessible to loads of different people. And,
now, just before we started, I'm going to drag this out of you because you're being honest.
No problem.
And I'll put a link in the comments below to a paper you wrote, and you told me you presented and won a prize recently at the Royal Aeronautical Society. So well done, you. That is quite a thing. Maybe you could just unpack what that then opened up for you. And remember where I'm coming from for this, dear viewer, is you're a 12 or 13-year-old in South Somerset in rural England, just mucking about with stuff, and people, Amazon, want to stop youngsters doing this. That's who wants to do it. They want the whole airspace for for themselves, for deliveries. Anyway, sorry, Jamie, just where did that lead you? Where did that prize lead you?
That's fine, yeah. So well, a lot of the because the rockets themselves, it's quite a unique hobby. A lot of people think of it as a toy, but I was lucky to enter a presentation competition at Augusta Western Helicopters in Yeovil. It was basically just a case of I did a presentation competition. I didn't win, but I was lucky enough to be one of the younger people there, and a lot of people were sort of presenting on final year projects at university. A lot of software sort of desk projects. Whereas I was very lucky then to be able to enter the national NE-Row competition that's run by the Aeronautical Society. And it's basically just you submit a technical paper on any subject. As you say, I was very lucky to win. And it was, I got some comments back recently just saying it was because of the fact that I had glue under my fingernails. It was the fact that I'd done things, and the project itself was quite unique. And I was quite lucky to receive that award. And I'm going to be traveling to Hamilton Place in London to pick up the award. But no, it's very much a case of water rocketry is very unique. And at the event itself, or at least when I was doing my presentation, I was lucky to do a bit of networking, and I met a chap from the RNLI who are based in Poole. The RNLI, if you don't know, is the Royal National Lifeboats Institution. Obviously, the UK, we have a lot of seas, and when people go aboard, the Lifeboats Institution has been around for nearly, I think it's over 100 years now, and they go out and rescue people off the coasts of England, and I was lucky enough to join them on a few weeks' work experience down in Poole, looking at replacing pyrotechnic flares on lifeboats. And the reason I was scouted is because they were looking at a very broad picture with regards to replacing these flares. They were looking at everything from a long camera on a stick to a fully fledged UAV, and they obviously liked the water rockets because the water rockets themselves are very, very cheap. They're very safe compared to pyrotechnics. There are a lot less regulations with regards to, you can't launch a pyrotechnic a quarter of a mile close to the shoreline, for example. So the water rocket itself could be enhanced with electronics to, search for people. Well, it wasn't searching for people. It was sort of providing illumination. So obviously you stick a whacking great LED on there. But it was a very broad design sprint, as it were. So we weren't looking at a specific topic. We weren't looking at a specific purpose. We were looking at the pyrotechnic flare, what it's used for, what it can be, what we can use to replace it, and its disadvantages and advantages. And it was a really good week. And also I must thank the RLI because of course they are a charity, and it was really great to go along and do a bit of work for them. But it's a very exciting world out there with regards to search and rescue, because I personally find that quite attractive to work for a company who are very noble in their intentions.
We'll flip that back to Josh in a minute because his company is very noble. But I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in and have a chat to Jamie before we do that.
Well, Gary, I'm very disappointed you've replaced me with Jamie as the representative of the young people.
Oh yeah, there is that.
Yeah, the price you pay for being a silver soarer.
Well, absolutely. But I thought it really nicely encapsulated what the industry will lose if we're not careful. If we over-regulate this, if we over-regulate model aircraft flying and experimentation and mucking about, it's just ridiculous, just for the want of a few DVDs arriving via Amazon, which is going to fail anyway.
It's when you look at it historically, the aviation industry has had its genesis in young people building model aircraft, getting them excited and flying. And most of the pilots I know have had built model aircraft when they were young, and I'm talking less than 12 years old. That was what got them interested in aviation. If you take that away from people, then what's going to happen to the supply of pilots, the manned aviators, who don't develop this lust for flying? They're shooting themselves in the foot.
Now, Joshua, Jamie also said to me it was a little bit before we started, a little bit disillusioned with what he was finding when he was going to interview for new companies. So I'm going to get Jamie. If you could you relate those stories? And because Joshua is the closest we've got to a real grown-up businessman on that line here. So if you could just pass your thoughts, just say what you said to me about the test you had to do, things like that. Carry on, mate.
Yeah, no. So obviously, I'm looking for an industrial placement at the moment with an engineering firm, hopefully in the fields of either aerospace or space. And I applied to BA Systems, of course, a big aerospace company. I applied to Atkins, who are consultants or engineering consultants, and it was very, very interesting because I know that a lot of them are going to be very competitive, particularly in growing fields with regards to UAVs with BA Systems. And I was sort of a bit bogged down in the whole application tests. It was very convoluted. It was sort of rather odd. I was asked to spell broccoli, courgette. I was asked the difference between companies, the three different spellings of company. It was all. I felt like I was being bogged down in HR in many respects, and I just feel that sort of with my water rocketry, it was. Think of something. Think of you have the problem. You try and think of the solution. You build a little prototype. You test it. If it doesn't work, you fly it. If it doesn't work, you go again. And I feel that these big companies now, that HR, I don't know. It seems to be they didn't seem to attract me to their company with regards to the fundamentals of engineering. A company like BAE Systems is meant to design, build, and I'm sure they do, but I feel it's very corporate now, and I feel a lot of big companies are very much HR related, and it's all about saying the right thing and doing the right thing. But of course, I don't want to say too much controversial stuff. But no, I definitely looking at working at a small company maybe, because if you look at something like ArduPilot. ArduPilot is this thing which has sprang up. It's individuals essentially who are passionate about something. There's no conferences or meeting or formal meetings or whatever for people to get bogged down in. It's okay, let's make something fun. Let's get on with something interesting. And I sort of lost my train of thought here, but it's all very much a case of, I think the fundamentals of engineering are well demonstrated within small companies from my research anyway. And I'd be happier to work for a small company, but who knows? We'll see what happens in that.
Well, you're asking the wrong guy. I got kicked out of my aerospace engineering degree in university, but I can tell you this. If you're going to go work for a BAE or a big defense contractor, chances are as a mechie or a double E, by the way, you can't spell geek without double E. I wish I was a double E so I could use that joke more. But you're going to be working on one very small thing. You're going to be working on the bolts or the main landing gear axle system or the secondary aileron control rod, right? You're going to be working on this one very small thing because engineering is now a distributed workforce problem. And so if you're looking to kind of get your hands dirty and work on things that touch a lot of the process, maybe a smaller company is right for you. One of the things that we look for at Kitty Hawk is execution over pedigree. And so, when we talk to potential candidates, the first thing that we ask them is, all right, let's just say you're hired tomorrow. What would you do in the first 90 days? How would you make the company better? What products would you work on? How would you improve what we have today? And if they say, well, I don't know, I don't use the product, or I'm not sure, well, that's a pretty good indicator that maybe they're not the fit for an early stage startup. We have the ability to touch almost every single part of the experience. There's not going to be the sort of classic hierarchical structure. Some days I write code, some days I write op-eds, some days I, write my own trouble ticket. But other days, like, I can just get away with doing 3 or 4 different things at once. And so it's really a good environment if you are into having a different job every day. Find yourself a lot happier when you have a lot more control over your destiny. I know I certainly did. So, for you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I remember when I was young, I applied for a job at Burroughs, which was a big computer company back in the day, and I had to go back to the interview about 5 or 6 times, and they gave us all these aptitude tests and, as you say, spelling tests and general knowledge and all stuff that was completely irrelevant. But it's the way big corporations work. Their HR department is, it's full of psychologists and all these people with fancy titles who get paid a lot of money. And as Joshua says, once you get into a job like that, it's boring as bat poo. You may learn a lot, but you're just doing rote tasks time and time again. That's why I've never really worked for large corporations for more than a few months at a time, because it's mind-numbingly dull. And people like yourself today, you've got so much opportunity. You can learn how to do 3D rendering, come up with an idea, and go to GoFundMe, Indiegogo or whatever, and you can start your own business. All you need is help on the business side of things, because you seem to be pretty clued up on the technical side of things. And I wish this was available when I was young, but my sort of breakthrough was I found a small company that I started working for, and they just did bespoke electronic projects. So I was able to exercise all my creativity, my ideas, and try stuff out. And we built some amazing stuff. And I would have worked there whether they paid me or not. It was so much fun. The money was a bonus, and I learned so much stuff, not just about the technology, but also how to run a business, because these guys were hands-on, and I was doing everything with them. So after that gave me a really good basics, starting point to start my own business, and I've basically worked for myself ever since. And I haven't worked for myself. I've hardly worked a day in my life, because I don't consider it work, because I do what I want to do when I want to do, and that's brilliant. So many people work 9 to 5 days a week, just so that they can spend a couple of days on the weekend enjoying themselves. Well, every day is fun for me, so I don't, I work 7 days a week, but it's not work, it's fun. So look at the opportunities that are out there. Don't think you've got to go to BAE or whatever to get some sort of credibility, because some of the richest and most dynamic people in the world, look at Bill Gates. He went straight from university, started his own business, and look where he is now. You don't have to go through that traditional, start at the bottom of the ladder and work your way up. You can build your own ladder and start wherever you like.
Good advice, Bruce. Unfortunately, I have other people to yell at today. So, Gary, thank you for having me. On to the next thing, but I appreciate the questions, the platform, and good luck to everybody.
Thanks for that. Very insightful.
Keep after it, man. You know what? Just because BAE didn't like the way you spell broccoli doesn't mean you're not worth anything to the world and you can't do what you want. Believe me, I have a degree in poetry. If I can do it, I'm living proof, man. So keep after it. Don't let anyone tell you. Cheers.
Broccoli means a lot to Josh. You see the green there. Cheers, Josh. Look after yourself. I was gonna throw in there that now it's the 3 of us, Compact and Bijou. I was going to throw in that you didn't mention when you spoke then that you actually won that prize, because I think you said the evaluators said you mentioned that you had actually made a thing. You didn't just present a load of MATLAB. You didn't just, as Bruce was alluding to, come up with a 3D rendering and put it on Indiegogo. You had a thing and you had done it, and that's pretty key now. I'm not sure I agree with your Indiegogo idea there, Bruce. Where were you taking that? Were you Josh?
I'm just saying that the opportunities are so great. I mean, that's one option. It's not an option I would ever take. But a lot of people have just gone out there with an idea and the technical nous to put it together. They've done some 3D rendering, thrown it on Kickstarter, and made a success of it. Of course, lots of people have failed, but one of the key things in your career and business is you've got to take risks to succeed, and sometimes you'll fail, but every failure is a learning experience, and next time you won't make those mistakes again. So you've got to be brave, you've got to be prepared to fail, and ultimately if you put the time, effort and work into it, you will succeed.
Yeah, fail forward faster. I'm a great great believer in that. You keep try again, which to young Jamie is going to seem like two old blokes talking the nonsense that his father and the lecturers say. But there we are.
In my day, when I was a boy.
I know.
No, I think it's competitions like this. To be honest, it wasn't actually well. I mean, I only got to enter really just through word of mouth, through a friend of a friend, and obviously my dad worked at the company. I still works at the company, and no, I just think it's about knowing the. It's about from what I've learned so far with the work I've done, the progress I've made. It's a lot about who you know, and it's about getting out there and talking to people, and especially with these events, trying to encourage people into engineering. I think is very important, and through making progress through projects at home, and obviously then being able to present them to other people who are like-minded, is quite important. But no, it's all very interesting stuff, and no, definitely with the water rockets, it's really interesting because it is very unique as a sort of I don't want to call it a UAS technically, but I did see in one of your recent videos, Gary, you talked about unmanned boats, whereas obviously it's in all shapes and forms with regards to UAVs, and no, it's very, very interesting stuff.
I just had a call from BAE Systems. They said you can't have very unique. It's an absolute. There are no shades of unique. I'm sorry, that's why you failed.
And he's that bloke in charge of HR, isn't he? Tom's saying humans are overrated. Yes, I know they are, and the software does a much better job, Tom. I know he's saying in the comments there.
But it's right. It is about who you know. Networking is important, and that's one thing you got. Get a social media presence, get a YouTube channel. You've probably got a YouTube channel, and show people what you're doing, and you'll be headhunted. I get job offers, not every day, but probably once or twice a month. I get job offers because people have seen what I'm doing on YouTube, and they say, "Oh, come and work for us. Come and work for us." I'm not interested. But if you've got a profile and people see that you're actually someone who can do something, then they'll hunt you out because good people are hard to find.
I think it's also about I think it's also about really being interested in it. There are a lot of people on my course who they're there and they're enjoying it, but I don't think they're truly inspired about the prospects of aircraft or about electronic engineering used in communication systems, for example. I think it's about being truly inspired and being happy about what you're doing. And for me anyway, it's certainly the applications of electronic engineering in all forms.
The word you're looking for is passion. You've got to have a passion for what you do.
No, but definitely it's I think particularly within electronic engineering, it links to so many different fields of interest. Certainly, we'll see where things go on this industrial placement. That's for sure.
Well, you're talking to the right. It was Bruce here. He's your man, isn't he? That's the right man. Especially if you want to learn about really old dodgy stuff, he'll tell you all about that.
Yeah, I know all about Gary.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. No, and you also had a visit to you got to have a look at what Westlands was doing. I think you said to me, Jamie, you're quite surprised at where they were taking their autonomous systems.
Yeah. So I remember when you visited us here in the UK, Gary, you went to Farnborough, and you talked about because I know Farnborough. I've been to Fairford a few times, but I know Farnborough is more sort of business related, about selling things to people. And you talked about how they were looking more at big UAVs with regards to the tonnage rather than small, sub 10 kilos or whatever. I think I would definitely vouch for that. I mean, I went to an IET talk as part of my student membership here at Bath. I went to a talk given by Leonardo, again a big aerospace company, on their UAV platform. Of course, they look at helicopters, so it was a rotary UAV, and I was surprised at how sort of they were talking about a lot of things. So a lot of people in the audience who were sort of senior engineers were asking, well, what if you lose radio communications with your UAV? What will it do? And of course, he'd then answer, oh, well, you can program in a failsafe which will come back and land. And I felt like putting my hand up and saying, I've done that. I've done that in my bedroom with, Omnibus F4 flight controller. But no, the UAVs themselves at Leonardo were they were talking about 2.5 tons, 5 tons, and they have. I know they have their optical turret systems which they have on them, but yeah, it all seemed very based on the technology they have at the moment. So the optical turrets they would have on a Wildcat taking off a destroyer or something, and no, it all seemed very not what I well. If it was me looking at it all, I think again we could talk about the HR. A lot of it was they were getting bogged down in sort of systems with regards to systems engineering, and of course it is very complicated in incorporating UAVs into military sort of operations. But no, it was, as we were saying before we went live, back in the olden days, so to speak, they would build something and they would test it. And I know they've done that. I think they've made a UAV prototype called Solo. It's about 180 kilograms. Again, rotary aircraft. But it's just a case of, I don't know, a lot of people seem to be over-engineering the role that UAVs will play. I mean, it was really interesting. They were talking about, everyone says, UAVs will cut the costs dramatically of military operations, whereas actually, when you start looking at the aircraft itself, it's going to be quite a big thing. It's going to have a lot of complex electronics, control algorithms on board. And yeah, they're talking about maybe the costs won't be cut so much, but I don't know. I think things will, we talked briefly, I put in the chat a couple of weeks ago, obviously, about driverless cars. You start talking about the fact that, okay, well, the technology is there. It's all really interesting. Once it's, but to be honest, do we really need it? Because is it just going to create more problems? People who are doing low-wage jobs, for example, going to be replaced by the driverless lorry? Well, you could say yes, if you first look at it, but actually, they will just start doing different jobs where they'll be maintaining the lorry, for example. But so I don't know. It's all very interesting.
Well, I think you're a bit. I think that's a touch of the sort of positive thinking of youth there, because there's going to be a lot less maintenance, and that'll be one of the reasons why they'll want to go autonomous, because there'll be a lot less work. It's a bit like there's a bit of a rush to have electric airliners. I know that seems like a big flight of fancy. See what I did there, Brucey style sort of thing. But if you've got an electric airliner, it can operate in and out of city airports during noise abatement times, which normal jet engines couldn't fly then. And so there'll be big money if they get that working. That's big money to the airlines, and increases the number of slots on already congested airports. Just a quick comment in the chat. Andrew's asking, Bruce, are you the only person in New Zealand the government has given problems for flying RC, or are there others?
I'm sure there are others, but I'm the highest profile, so whoever puts his head up the highest is more likely to get it hit. But I'm doing pretty well with the government. We're getting on very well. And did you read the results of the CAA survey, Gary? Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we'll see what happens.
No, that was a grand thing. Sorry, I jumped away from that. But I think, what was I going to say to you, Jamie? I think that the trouble with a big company is you have, not only do you have a meeting about each nut and bolt, as Joshua was alluding to, but you also have to have meetings about the biscuits and cups of coffee and tea that you're going to serve at the next meeting, and a meeting to schedule the meeting, and it just slows everything down. In the 50s in Westlands and Yeovil, they probably would have said, well, I tell you what, night shift, see if you can knock that arm up together and see what you can do, and they would have made a thing, whereas now it's a lot of the process. But I've never worked in the world of engineering, so I don't know. Bruce, you might have more comments to that.
Yeah, the bigger the company, the more they focus on the process than the goal. And small companies are goal oriented. They say, we're going to do this, and they do it. And people say you can't do that, but they'll do it anyway because that's what they're doing. So they achieve amazing things. That's why you see small startups doing amazing things. And big companies just tend to lumber on. They've got a certain amount of inertia, so they can carry on as they always have, but it makes them vulnerable to small startups because they can't move quickly. And they are so focused, as you say, on, working out what sort of biscuits to have with morning tea and the process involved in doing something, and they have to tick off all these little things on checklists. So they can't achieve the same results. They can't innovate. They can't come up with new ideas as quickly because there are so many steps that even the simplest idea has to pass through before it even gets to engineering. So that's why small companies are a far more exciting place to work, and they're the companies that actually create stuff, and that's why I have never really been interested in big companies.
Yeah, no, I definitely, it's very, I mean, I don't want to boo-boo the big companies because obviously I haven't worked for them. I'm sure they do some pretty cool stuff, but no, it's very, very insightful. I mean, again, I haven't worked in engineering formally as a career, so I don't know the business side of it per se, but I'm very interested in learning more about that, particularly on the industrial placement program. But yes, it's I think you're absolutely right, Gary, about the sort of what they would have had at Westlands, and again, things are getting more complicated. Health and safety is now becoming more and more prevalent within big companies, so you have more regulations there. But it's all just change, isn't it? It's all things will change, and I'm just sort of coming into a new stage and maybe saying too much.
Let me move you away from that. I'll address some of the comments that we got. I'll throw those out to the floor in a minute. But I have to go in my Westland story. If you watch this hangout, I come up with silly stories. My one Westland story is, I think it was either Crookhern or Yeovil Scouts. The night shift made them a trailer for their canoes, and they made it out of titanium, and it must have been the most expensive, strong canoe trailer that a scout group's ever had. And I believe heads rolled over that particular incident. But anyway, that's my Western. And they used to lose, and they've lost. Well, your dad will have loads of stories about that. Anyway, in the comments, people are saying, of course, all aircraft will be unmanned. All right, let's just discuss. Do we think all
passenger jets?
You reckon? Passenger jets, people in the comments. No. What about passenger jets? And then the next thing in the comments is will they all be designed by computers as well? Not only will they be unmanned, but they'll also be designed by computers. What do you think about that?
Well, I think
artificial intelligence. I mean, look at the way automation's going now. It's like pretty soon everything will be done. Look at cars. Cars are a perfect example. Cars these days, they all look the same. Why is that? Because they're all designed to have the lowest drag coefficient and it's done by a computer. So naturally, the shapes are pretty much the same, different ornaments on them. But when I was a young boy, going back to the Stone Age, you could recognise a Morris Oxford from an Austin Princess from miles away because they all look so dramatically different. They were designed with styling in mind. No one cared about drag because cars didn't go very fast and fuel economy wasn't an issue. But now you've got computers designing everything. It's all the same, and it shows. The fact that they do look the same shows that computers are just doing all the work.
I think it's very interesting. If you look at something like the F-35, for example, the Joint Strike Fighter Lightning II, it's very much what a lot of people are saying that it's going to be the last manned jet fighter. Obviously, for obvious reasons, benefits of having a UAV, but also because I've heard this. A lot of you may have heard this as well. The G-forces are the limiting factor. So the pilot making a banking turn is the limiting factor on the maneuverability of a jet fighter nowadays. And a lot of the F-35 is quite complicated because it's so expensive. It's really interesting if you look at previous jet fighters made by different countries. You look at the price of the F-35. It's so well politically engineered. So different parts of it are made in different states of America. So they can't cancel it. You can't cancel it. So that's I suppose an advantage of having a big company is that you do have people who are working on these. It's so complicated now because it is so big and it employs so many people that because it's so well politically engineered, it can't be cancelled. But so no, it's interesting things like that. But yeah, no, I don't know about again. I don't know too much about how much of aircraft will be unmanned, but no, that's just quite interesting. It's the physical constraints of having a person in the aircraft as well. I think need to be taken into account, as well as
that's interesting. I've heard that said quite a few times, but if you look at the facts, there haven't been actually any fighter type air engagements since the Korean War. But most of the engagements with fighter aircraft have been long distance with intelligent armament, like missiles, long range missiles. They sit back 60 miles away, push a button and shoot a plane down. So the whole issue of maneuverability, G-forces, I think it's a bit of a red herring that the defense industry is bringing up and saying, oh, well, you need new fighters that can perform better. But it's not about fighters anymore. It's about the weapons they carry. That's where the real smarts, that's where battles are won and lost. And if you look at it, we're already, the bulk of offensive actions taken by the Air Force already done with unmanned aircraft. Look at all the drone strikes in Iraq and all around Syria and places like that. It's all unmanned aircraft. And there's very few traditional bombing runs now. They just, you know, fire up a trailer in Arkansas, Tennessee or whatever and pilot a drone and blow some poor or some insurgent to pieces halfway across the world. So I think we're already there. We don't have fighter combat anymore. We have drone combat. So the future has already arrived.
I agree. I don't think well, the F-35 will come into service, but it's a really, it's not really liked. it's a real hodgepodge of stuff.
Designed by a committee and a big company.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And I was looking around because what I have got of the F-35 is the last 3 farmers, they gave away a load of memory sticks and loads of badges. I've got all sorts of F-35 memorabilia, but I haven't actually. The one kitted itself up. They had some I'm going to struggle to remember the facts, but it would have taken an awful lot of tankers to get it. The range is so poor, it took loads of tanks to get it across the Atlantic. But the one that was coming for Farnborough last time, it shredded itself driving down the runway. All the nuts and bolts, the engine fell apart, so it didn't actually depart America. So it is a really necessary thing. And perhaps the more exciting end and the less sexy end of that sort of military development of drones is the high altitude persistent platforms, which I have a great joy in always describing, as was described to me from the guys at Kinetic from Boscombe Down, who launched the Zephyr in 2010 and absolutely smashed all the records. That it was launched by 6 blokes and real ale. Now that, you see, that's where proper design is. And all it has to be able to do is designed so light that if there's any weather, it will fall apart at low altitude. The weather will have it. So you've got to go on a good weather day. But once it's gone, it's up there, and it's up there for months. When they broke the record 2 weeks, they still had something like 90% of battery remaining. They weren't even trying. They ran out of range time, so they had to land, and that was 2 weeks. So there is some very cutting edge, and I say 6 blokes from real ale, but there's anything in life, I think, that people make look easy is often really, really hard. And then some clever people have just make it look effortless. Well, it won't be an unmanned aircraft. We'll be in the hyperlink tubes going supersonic. Well, yes, maybe, but because we won't be in the cars either, because cars are a dumb thing. It's the huge expensive thing you buy, and 90% of the time you don't use the flipping thing. What a waste of money. So we'll all be in the autonomous cars and, yes, hyperlink tubes. I don't understand. I bet you've got a not popular mechanics. Yes, it was popular mechanics. I bet you've got a popular mechanics with those tubes in it somewhere, haven't you, Bruce?
Yeah, it's not a new concept. It goes way back, and a lot of Elon Musk stuff isn't new. He's just got old ideas and tried to apply new tech to them to make them work again. I remember when I was a kid, we used to go to a big department store, and when you paid for your purchase, they'd put the money in a little capsule, put it in a tube, and it'd go and disappear. And then a few seconds later, your receipt would come back with your change. It's just a hypertube in a department store. Same thing.
Yes, I used to work in Ilminster Co-op, Jamie. We used to have those tubes back in the day. Yes, and yes, Tom.
Welcome to nostalgia.
Exactly. Yeah, things. It's deja vu all over again. We won't. I'll be teleported. Oh, they're going mad on the comments now. Come on, really? Come on. Yeah. What else? We were wandering around nicely. What else did I spy? Bruce, you had something about Australia and getting even more sensible regulations.
Well, I don't know, more sensible, but obviously, like most regulators, CASA is under pressure from politicians and the media and the public to toughen drone regulations, to stop bad things happening. And so previously in a sub 2 kg category, you could fly right up to the boundary, the side boundary of an airfield. The premise being that planes don't take off across the runway, they take off down the length of the runway, so there shouldn't be any aircraft at low altitude beside the runway. I don't know of any incidents that caused, but bowing to pressure, CASA have revised that regulation, and they've come up with a really good one. Now, most countries have this exclusion zone around airports, which is fair and reasonable. You don't want model aircraft and drones interacting with full-size aircraft. But they don't take into account the fact that some airports are really busy and some are used once a week or once a month even. All airports are pretty much treated the same. But CASA's been smart. They've said, well, we know a lot of our airports in Australia are not used very often, so we'll let you fly within that 5.5 kilometre exclusion zone so long as you land whenever an aircraft comes along. Well, excuse me, that's what I've been doing anyway. It's really simple. If there are no aircraft in the air, then your drone doesn't pose a threat to anything. And if you land when an aircraft comes along, then your drone still poses no threat. So there's no reason to sort of unilaterally block all flying within an area that might see an aircraft once a week. So I think it's a really good idea. But one thing that people have pointed out to me is FPV is illegal in Australia. And well, it's interesting. Some people have said, oh, under the regulations, FPV is illegal because you must always maintain, the pilot must always maintain direct eye contact, visual line of sight with the model. And so people are saying, and we've got, the people have been fined for flying FPV. And I'm thinking, well, if that's the case, why didn't CASA raid the drone nationals when they were held in Australia and arrest everybody? You know, I mean, because I think it's one of those rules which I don't like, where they say, okay, technically this is not allowed, but unless you cause an issue, we're going to ignore the fact that you're breaking this regulation. That's a bad regulation. Good regulations should always be enforced. You can't have this sort of arbitrary judgment made on the day by someone who's a desk pilot as to whether we're going to fine you today, but tomorrow we wouldn't bother. That doesn't work. They should tidy that up a bit. I think it needs a bit of work.
Well, we just always hark back to enforcement, don't we? And I think, and I'll circle back around on that LAANC thing. If fees are going to be taken, then I think that money should go to the FAA to go towards policing the bad actors or something like that. Some other airspace safety thing. I thought blast something else in mind.
No, I just want to say something I've sort of had on my mind for quite a while, really, and that's people who, you know, when you look at drones and when you look at, you know, the things, obviously more and more people are buying drones now, they're becoming more accessible to people, and people are making regulations. You see it in all sorts of different examples when something new comes along, and you know, sort of it has small teething issues. The authorities, they panic and they make regulations. They say, right, okay, we're going to try and do something. People are going to see that we're doing something. People are going to, you know, say, well done. Whereas actually, when you rush making these new regulations, you actually produce bad regulations. And I think the rushing, and because obviously the rise in drones and the rise in people using these things. I remember when I was really young, I got a little sort of, I can't remember what it's called, the Hubsan X4. It was a tiny little quadcopter thing with brushed motors, and I went outside and I wanted to fly as high as I could in the garden. And of course, you know, I grew out of that and I realized that I actually wanted to have control of it. But it's just the fact that, you know, this rushed regulation is not, you know, the people who are going to be breaking it won't necessarily know about it. And I think it's very much a case of common sense with a lot of these things. But, yeah.
You did write about the new things scaring people. Did you see on that Facebook page I set up for the Tokoroa fly-in, which now won't happen, someone posted a video from the BBC from the 1977 about skateboarding? Did you watch that, Gary?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did.
Just mirror that 40 years ahead, and we're seeing exactly the same thing with drones. The guy looked just like you, the guy that was saying these are too dangerous and they can do 40 miles an hour. I thought it might have been you in an earlier life.
I have been poo-pooing technology for many years now and trying to put a kibosh on people's fun in many, many ways. I know what I was going to say now. I was going to say, so that's an obvious and fantastic ruling from Australia. Point number A, why on earth don't we all just copy Australia? Because they've got it so right. I wonder if, when you then mention that they say, yes, okay, so FPV is outside of the purview and all that sort of thing, don't do it. Is it not just that they haven't come up with the right wording yet? That someone will come around. There's got to be a fudge or a fix or a way around, and the wording and the way of doing it. There's got to be an obvious safety thing.
There is, but I mean, it's none of the regulators, some of them, everyone seems to get something right, but nobody's got the whole thing right. You know, look, we look at Canada. Brilliant. They say, well, helipads don't need the same exclusion area as a fixed wing airport, so they make the exclusion zone smaller. That's very good. But on the other hand, they have the other lunatic regulations they've got. And so each one of them has sort of solved one of the problems very well, but completely stuffed up the other problems. But I get this feeling that they all want to be able to say, our regulations are best, so we're not going to copy them because we're better, you know, and this is the problem. Everyone's competing. And I know here in New Zealand, CAA, when they first came up with their drone regulations, they said they would be world leading. And I was thinking, okay. But in some ways they are, because they've got this shielded operation thing, which allows you to fly, you know, close to airfields. That's another way to solve the, you know, the proximity to airfield problem. But, you know, everyone's got something to add, but no one's bringing it all together and coming up with a combined package. It was interesting to note that I said in my video that perhaps all the regulators should get together and come up with the right ideas. And someone from Australia said, no, because they'll just corrupt our regulators with their stupid ideas, you know. It's probably true. But I thought if I put that out there, knowing regulators, they'll say, what a great idea. Let's go to Tahiti for 2 weeks and discuss it all on the taxpayer. And so
well, just get us tickets. Get us tickets. Surely there'll be a spectators gallery. Come on, Bruce. You can do it. You can do it. We'll go represent New Zealand Civil Aviation Authority or something like that. But yeah, and speaking of those sort of meetings, I saw one that the Europeans are having, and there was a picture on LinkedIn and of the group having it, and it was about not more than 20 blokes in suits in a big, huge room, and they were there, and they were making some big decisions for what will affect both aero modeling and the UAS world. And you're thinking, you look at that picture and does anyone in that room really know? And there's some new standards, actually. If you're watching from the UK, dear viewer, there are some new proposals for the UK being driven by London and other sorts of people, and the British standards are coming out with British standards for RPA. And I've said I would hope that at least, my comment was, I would hope that at least 75% of the people on that standards committee have built something for themselves, at least have an idea of what's involved. And there's some other things. So for some weird reason, they've asked my input for that. So I'm putting input on that British standards thing. So if anybody has any ideas, please send them to the normal address and I'll completely ignore them. But yeah, it's at least they are asking for input, I suppose. Anyway, rant ends. Over to you, Bruce. Say something, Bruce.
As usual, I have absolutely nothing to say.
I think it's just well, it's common sense, basically, isn't it? You talk a lot about regulations, but it's all about common sense, and it's about balancing regulations with functionality, isn't it? So. But the problem is it's so complicated. The regulations are complicated. They're complicated for most things. But, you know, I don't know all of the laws in the UK here. You know, I went, you know, Gary, but I went gliding recently. I go gliding most weekends. And we have a 6-page booklet on driving the quad bikes to recover the gliders. And I don't know those 6 pages recovering a glider, because obviously, you know, I don't know those 6 pages, but I just use common sense. And 9 times out of 10, well, more than that, 99 times out of 100, it's all fine. You know, it's all fine. But, you know, there's that one time when something can slip up. And it's just a case of, familiarizing yourself with the most important parts of those regulations. But, bottom line is...
You've allowed me to tell a gliding story now. Well done, good man. So when I was your age and learning to glide, never quite sure whether it was an insurance job or whether it was an accident, and it almost pertained, and it wouldn't happen now because you're on a quad bike, but the guys next to us reversed a tractor over the back of the Blarnec. It didn't fly very well after that. Not sure whether they wanted to get rid of the Blarnec or whether it was an accident. So that's why you need that book.
I can imagine there was some rollicking involved.
There was some language that I was a young man of your age that I'd never heard before.
Oh,
but, yes, some nautical language, I believe it is.
You must have a very good memory to go that far back in time, Gary.
Curses. You got me there, Bruce. You got me. Actually, look at that. We're rolling up to the hour or a minute to go. So does anyone else have anything else before I put the hammer down on this one? No, cool. All right, Jamie, thank you very, very much. A bit of bias. We're both from the same village in Somerset, separated by several years. Well done, and good luck to you.
Thank
I
you,
am
Gary.
impressed, and you are a good reason why we cannot have regulators stopping young people flying model airplanes in playing fields all around the world, hitting them into houses, trees, breaking them, knocking their fingers, doing all those other good things. If they don't do that, we're going to be finished as a society. And who's going to watch Bruce's videos? That's the other thing. And Bruce, thank you very much. I look forward to your next outing, see if there's any more windy radiant flights, and that particularly mad flying wing I like that was petrol as well. That was pretty cool. Dear viewer, thank you very much for joining us wherever you are in the world. Have a lovely rest of the weekend and a fabulous weekend. Like, subscribe, do all those other YouTubey things that you want to do. Bruce is XJet and RC Model Reviews. Jamie, I've forgotten the name of your channel. Tell us your channel again. I'll put it in the bottom.
JSB Rocketry, and obviously there's the website as well. But obviously, go to it at your leisure. I don't make any money from it, so go on there and have a read. I only made it just to keep track, because obviously I wrote a lot of things down with the rockets, and I realized, well, why don't I just make it all public and so people can have a look at it all. But yeah, it is quite undervalued as a hobby, and I definitely recommend people have a look at model rocketry.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's very impressive stuff. All right, with that, thanks very much, everyone. Take care. See you all again next week, 2100 GMT, same time, same place. Cheers.